Welcome. My name is Tara Nagati, and I'm a Judicial Branch Law Librarian at the Torrington Law Library. I'll be serving as the facilitator for today's program. Today's program was developed in response to a request from a clerk's office to provide information and guidance to attorneys, both new and experienced, about the available Judicial Branch Law Library resources and services. The effective practice of law requires strong drafting skills and a knowledgeable understanding of the tools, resources, and services available to assist in drafting persuasive pleadings. The goal today is to demonstrate what the law libraries offer and how the law librarians, through their experience and knowledge of the materials and publications, are able to provide valuable assistance. We have with us a panel of Judicial Branch Law Librarians. All are experienced and credentialed law librarians with the branch. They are the moderator, Claudia Jaloka, Supervising Law Librarian and Manager of the Rockville Law Library, and our panel, Tony Booth, Law Librarian at the Danbury Law Library, Marianne Kravicki, Law Librarian at the Bridgeport Law Library, and Michelle Penn, Law Librarian at the New Haven Law Library. As the moderator reads each scenario, members of the panel will be invited to discuss ways to approach the outlined situation and also to suggest resources that provide relevant information and/or document templates. Following each scenario, I will facilitate asking the panel questions. These are questions that I have based on the response of the panel members. Following the panel discussion, Claudia will review some of the resources available in our law libraries for doing case law research. Motion practice often requires case law research, and the law libraries have resources both print and electronic for conducting case law research. Some of the resources mentioned in the scenarios will also be noted in this portion of the program. In the final segment of today's program, Tony will discuss the services available to you, both in the courthouse law libraries and through remote access services. I will now turn the program over to Claudia and the panel.
Good afternoon. As Taryn has indicated, we will be using scenarios focusing on several legal topics and situations that will illustrate some of the resources for locating samples and example motions that are available to you in the law libraries. Each of the 8 scenarios will highlight resources and a way in which they might be utilized. The resources highlighted in the scenarios are not at the exclusion of other resources, and they represent just a potential stage of your entire research. There is a link on the page where you accessed this video to a selected bibliography of resources for motions practice in Connecticut, along with a few references to non-Connecticut specific titles. Not all of these titles will be discussed today, but we will go over some that will be highlighted as representative and along with other resources from the library. Taryn, as she has indicated, will then pose questions to the panel and myself at the end of each scenario. So let's get started by starting off with one regarding a family matter. Your client was divorced 4 years ago in Massachusetts, but has been living in Connecticut for 2 years with the couple's 2 minor children. Her ex has been living in New York for 3 years. The divorce decree sets child support and alimony. Since moving to Connecticut and starting school, one of the children has been diagnosed with a condition which affects both his physical health and cognitive abilities. The child now requires costly medical and educational support, some of which is not covered by insurance, and this is turning into a financial hardship for your client. Meanwhile, the father's income has more than tripled with his new position in New York. Your client would like to have the other parent contribute more to the child's financial needs. You determine that you need to domesticate the Massachusetts decision in Connecticut. To the panel, I will ask, where might you find information and sample petitions to register this judgment in Connecticut?
Claudia, I would recommend the Library of Connecticut Family Law Forms published by the Connecticut Law Tribune for a notification of the filing of petition registering a foreign matrimonial judgment and the petition itself. The Connecticut Law Tribune has published several form books of this type, including in the areas of personal injury and business litigation. The books are a collection of numerous samples of forms and pleadings. The drawback to this publication is that there is no index to the volume. Instead, You gain access to the forms using the table of contents. Now, the table of contents is generally arranged in procedural order, starting through complaints and initial pleadings, pretrial, discovery, motions and objections, trial settlement, and post-judgment matters. The specific content will vary by publication.
Great. So once the judgment is registered, you file a support modification. The other parent is insisting that he is unable to contribute more to the child's support, and he is refusing to provide the required financial discovery. You suspect this other parent may be hiding assets, and you would like to depose him regarding the matter. You do need to ask the court's permission to depose him. Where might information regarding and samples of this motion be found?
If I may, I could think of two resources that I often turn to when assisting patrons at the Bridgeport Law Library. First, Connecticut Family Law and Practice with Forms, part of the Connecticut Practice Series by Rutkin. Here you will find a motion to take out-of-state deposition. The second resource is Family Law Practice in Connecticut by Edelman. There's a section titled Commission to Take Out-of-State Deposition Motion. Both of these subject treatises, like many of our Connecticut treatises, provide a discussion on the procedure, and as with the Rutkin publication, may provide sample motions or language.
And thank you, Marianne. That's the end of the scenario. I'm going to turn things over to Taryn for questions.
Thank you, Claudia. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I will be asking questions of the panel members regarding some of the resources that they mentioned in the scenarios. So I'd like to start by asking about the Connecticut Law Tribune form publications that Tony was mentioning. If I can't get to the law library, would it be possible to have part of the table of contents emailed to me so that I may find a form that may be relevant to my legal situation? And then if I do find an applicable form, would I then be able to have that form emailed to me as well?
Yes, absolutely. We have those forms in electronic format, so we'd be happy to send you the table of contents and send you any forms you requested after that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tony. I'm going to give it back to Claudia for our second scenario.
Okay. For our second scenario, let's talk about form books specifically. Your client was severely injured in a motor vehicle accident. The accident involved another driver losing control of his vehicle, crossing over the line, and hitting your client's car in a head-on crash. Your client has sustained injuries to her legs, arms, and head, some of which may be permanent. The other driver told police that he was traveling down the road when his vehicle came to a sudden sharp rise in the road, and the car became briefly airborne before landing back on the road. The driver claims that he lost control when his vehicle reconnected with the ground. The police report does indicate that the other driver was speeding. The area where this accident occurred is well known to local police and town officials, since many young drivers in town frequently do travel this stretch of road at a high rate of speed in an effort to experience that sense of being momentarily airborne in the car. You intend to bring a personal injury lawsuit against both the other driver and the town. In compliance with Connecticut General Statute Section 13A-149, you need to file notice with the town. And you'll also want to file notice with the other driver. I'm going to ask Michelle this time, what might be some of the resources to consult for samples of these notices?
Well, Claudia, the first place I might look is to the Connecticut Lawyer's Desk Book Forms Index, to Chapter 22 for the sample letter of representation and the statutory notice, which is a notice to the town. The Connecticut Lawyer's Desk Book and its Forms Index is an older but quite valuable title. And as the title infers, it is targeted towards practitioners and can include both procedural direction and forms or motions. And for librarians, this is one of the first resources we turn to for the issue of mechanics liens. Another place to look for pleadings in a situation like this might be another of the Connecticut Law Tribune form publications that Tony mentioned. This time I would look at the Library of Connecticut Personal Injury Forms for the notice to defendant driver and the statutory notice for defective highway, which is a notice to the state that can be modified.
Thank you, Michelle. So as the matter progresses, you want to file additional interrogatories beyond those that are provided for in the practice book. In accordance with Connecticut Practice Book 13-6, you want to file a motion for permission to serve non-standard interrogatories. Where might you turn for that?
Claudia? Again, I might turn to the Library of Connecticut Personal Injury Forms for the plaintiff's motion for permission to serve non-standard discovery requests on the defendant.
Great. Okay, so the motion is granted. What are some of the publications which would include samples of other types of interrogatories? Marianne, you want to take that one?
Well, Claudia, I would suggest Bender's Forms of Discovery, which contains an exhaustive compilation of interrogatories. This set may be used in either print or electronic format via Patron Access Lexis. Patron Access Lexis, available in the law libraries, offers access to selected treatises collection in the areas of employment, family, personal injury, real estate, and workers' compensation law. Our libraries also offer access to Patron Access Westlaw. In Westlaw, there's a service called Form Finder. Form Finder conducts searches through the Westlaw databases which house forms, motions, and pleadings based on the search terms entered. Jurisdiction can also be specified. Just to let you know, the Law Library's computer use rules apply to the use of both Patron Access Westlaw and Lexis, along with any vendor-imposed restrictions.
And Claudia, I'd also suggest Model Interrogatories by Culhane or Guerrilla Discovery by Lipson. And although these are not Connecticut-specific titles, they provide some excellent examples of interrogatories which you can adapt to fit your Connecticut needs.
Great. Thank you both so much. That ends this particular scenario, so we're going to invite Taryn back up.
Thank you, Claudia. Access to digital forms can be a great time saver, especially because rewriting interrogatories can be an arduous task. So am I understanding you correctly that there's access to online interrogatories through either Westlaw or Lexis?
Yes, Taryn. You can access Bender's through Lexis, and you can use Form Finder through Westlaw.
Great. Thank you, Marianne. And I just have another question for you, Michelle. Is there a digital version of the interrogatories found in the Guerrilla Discovery publication that you had mentioned?
Yes, the Guerrilla Discovery does come with a CD that you can use.
Okay, and if I brought in a flash or a thumb drive into the library, would I be able to use that to copy those forms from that CD?
Oh, sure. You just need to let the librarian on staff know that you're going to be using a flash or thumb drive so that we can scan it for viruses.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to give it back to Claudia for our third scenario.
All right, so continuing on with form books for scenario 3, let's look at general non-Connecticut resources for forms. Your client is an 18-year-old high school senior who was born female and has been officially identified as such through most of his public school years. However, in the yearbook, he wants to include a quote that identifies him as male. The school, through the yearbook advisor, has rejected the quote as inappropriate for the forum. Your client insists on including the quote in the yearbook in order to recognize the years of high school bullying and then some acceptance by supportive classmates and administrators. You want to better understand the school environment and the issues that your client faces at school. Where might someone look for this type of information in the library?
Claudia, I think law review and law journal articles might be a good place to start. Hine Online is a database that provides access to the majority of national law reviews and journals. I should think you would find numerous articles on the topics of schools, students, and LGBTQ issues.
And Tony, Claudia, another resource in this scenario might be Andrew Trials. Locating an in-depth article or two on freedom of expression in schools and LGBTQ issues might be enlightening here. Likewise, Causes of Action might also have some informative articles. Both of these resources offer articles based on actual cases that provide techniques, strategies, and guidance for litigation. They also include detailed procedures and strategies, including motions. I'd also want to point out that for analysis of school law overall in Connecticut, the publication A Practical Guide to Connecticut School Law covers a broad array of school-related topics.
Okay, thank you, Tony and Michelle. Okay, so back to our scenario. Given that time is running out because the yearbook goes to print in a few months, if you were to file for injunctive relief, where might you look for samples?
I would start with the Judicial Branch Superior Court Civil Procedures page on temporary injunctions found on the Judicial Branch website. This page provides information on governing statutes and rules. In addition, there is also the Law Library's Law by Subject page, which provides links to information on injunctions, including a research guide. If you are not familiar with the Law by Subject pages, they offer links to authoritative internet sources on specific legal topics and issues.
Oh, Tony, if I may add, sticking with the point of general resources, AMDR pleading and practice forms, which is often used by many of the attorneys who visit my library, offers several examples of injunction motions and notices. This could be found in print in some of our libraries and through Westlaw in all of our libraries. Also worth mentioning, Connecticut Civil Practice Forms, which is part of the Connecticut Practice Series. Here you will find a sample Connecticut injunction.
Great, thank you both. That takes the end to the end of this scenario. Again, I'm going to let Taryn come up and quiz us.
Okay, Tony, is Hein Online available remotely, and would I be able to access it from my office?
No, unfortunately it's not. You will need to come to the library to use it.
Okay, so since you said it's not, if I had a citation to a particular law review article, would it be possible to request the library to forward me a copy by email?
Absolutely. We're happy to deliver it to you that way. Yeah.
And another one for Tony. Where would I find the Superior Court's Civil Procedures page that you had mentioned?
You'll find the Civil Procedures page on the Judicial Branch's main page. You would click on the Attorneys tab. Then you would click on the Statutes and Standing Orders. And then you would find the Civil Procedures page.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn back to Claudia for our next scenario.
So, turning to treatises and digests. Scenario 4 is looking at motions for advice. You have been appointed as the committee to conduct the public auction of a property that is subject to a mortgage foreclosure. You know that the property is vacant and that it abuts a town park. After reviewing the property description and the map of the property, which are part of the court file, you find that the road that provides access to the property is also the access road to the town park. When you are conducting your on-site inspection of the property, you find that that portion of the road that provides access to the property and the house has been permanently blocked by the town to shut off public vehicle use of that portion of the road which runs through the park. Of course, none of this had appeared in the court file. You, as the committee, are responsible for drafting the notice to bidders, that's the JDCV 80, in connection with the public auction. You realize that you need to request the advice of the court concerning the notice as part of the fact sheet notice to bidders, alerting the public and any potential bidders to the questionable status of access over the existing roadway, traveling from the barricade to the house. Mary Ann, what might you consult?
Well, Claudia, for me, the first place I would go might be Connecticut Foreclosures, an attorney's manual of practice and procedure by Karen and Milne. Chapter 7 covers the work of the committee and discusses unusual expenses and refers you to Judicial Form JDCV 81, which is Instructions for Foreclosure by Sale. This then leads you to JDCV 100, Foreclosure Motion for Advice.
Thank you. So the court approved the language in the notice to bidders, and during the week before the scheduled sale, the attorney for the defendant motioned the court to open and vacate the judgment by sale and then to enter a judgment of strict foreclosure. The court has so ruled. Subsequently, you file a motion to approve committee fees and expenses and for payment by the plaintiff. That's the JDCB 99 form. Since the auction did not take place, the plaintiff files an objection regarding being responsible for compensating the committee for fees or for paying expenses incurred by the committee. You need to conduct some research to find decisions that address this issue. How might you start?
Well, Claudia, in a situation like this, one way to sometimes begin case law research is through West Connecticut Digest, the descriptive word index. Using the topic mortgages with the subtopic sale and expense, the digest provides references which put you on the trail to a number of cases on point.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. That is our scenario here. Again, I'm going to let Taryn take over for some questions.
So if the pre-printed court form you referenced does not have enough space for me to fully articulate the reason for seeking advice from the court, would the court prefer a drafted motion for advice, and would that be acceptable? Or should I just attach an additional sheet behind the pre-printed form with the reasons?
Well, Taryn, a drafted motion should be acceptable, but you should always check with the clerk's office where you're filing first to see what's acceptable.
Great, thank you, Marianne. And then also, can I check that Connecticut foreclosure book that you had mentioned out of the library?
Unfortunately, no. In general, none of the Connecticut material circulates, but you can check with your local law librarian to see if possibly they have an older version of the book, and they may let you check that out.
Great, thank you, Marianne. Back to Claudia again.
Okay, so again, using treatises, let's look at using resources to find cases, which then will allow us to access the records and briefs for samples of pleadings. So your small practice has recently decided to take on a few business clients. One of the first matters involves a claim against an LLC that includes the CUTPA Deceptives Act. That's the Congenstat Section 42-110A. You are charged with drafting the complaint. You would like to know a bit more about how these claims are addressed by the court, and for guidance, you'd like to see one or two prior filed complaints. What subject matter treatise might you begin with?
If I may add, for business litigation questions, I frequently use Connecticut Business Litigation. There's a section on unfair or deceptive acts or practices, which provides a discussion on deceptive acts under CUTPA. And also in the section is a discussion of the application of the cigarette rule.
Marianne, another treatise I would consult is Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices, Business Torts, and Antitrust, Volume 12 of the Connecticut Practice Series. There's a good discussion on misrepresentation and failure to disclose, and all of Chapter 4 addresses CUTPA and related business torts. Another section has an extensive discussion on the content of pleadings in regards to CUTPA.
Okay, thank you both. So, you have looked at these treatises, and referenced in the footnotes are some leading cases. You've made notes on some of the more recent Supreme and Appellate Court decisions. You review those decisions and decide that a few are relevant to your matter. Making note of the argued dates of these decisions, you then go to the records and brief files in the library. In the records, you find the complaints filed in the underlying Superior Court matters. Reviewing and copying these complaints can provide you with a bit more confidence as you draft your own complaint. Michelle, I'm going to ask you if you could tell us or explain to us a bit more about what are records and briefs.
Of course, Claudia. Records and briefs are an overlooked resource and can be a rich source of motions and pleadings. The records and briefs for the Connecticut Supreme and Appellate Courts include the briefs that were filed at the appellate level and those parts of the Superior Court record which were identified as relevant to the appealed matter and sent to the higher court. These records can include motions and pleadings from the trial court. Finding a Supreme or Appellate Court case on your issue or fact pattern and accessing the relevant records can save you significant time in crafting a motion and keep you from reinventing the wheel. Our libraries have records and briefs from 1986 to the present on microfiche and in print for years prior to that. To access the records and briefs on fiche or in print, you'll need the argue date of the decision, as you mentioned. This is easily found in the official reports preceding the decision date. In some instances, the fiche includes a table of contents to facilitate locating the specific documents in the record. And don't worry, a law librarian can assist you in using this resource. In this scenario, we can look at the records for several cases referenced in the treatises mentioned by Marianne and Tony. Another way to access court records is through the case lookup database. Suppose you want to find another Section 42-110A claim against LLCs in your JD. Using the case lookup database, you can enter the search with LLC in the party last name field, set your location field, and for this example, New Britain HHB. In the case type field, select C30 specific performance, and in the name search type field, select contains. You'll then have access to the complaints and for the cases in the results list, and you can browse through those addressing 42-110A.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. And that is the end of this particular scenario. Again, we're going to let Taryn take over for a bit.
So I have a few more questions. Do you know if the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices publication, the one that's part of the practice series, if that's been updated recently?
It has. It's updated annually, as is all of the Connecticut practice series.
Great, thanks, Tony. And now, Michelle, I have a question about the records and briefs. If I wanted a copy of any of the documents that are contained within the records and briefs, particularly the ones available on microfiche, would I need to come into the law library to obtain a copy, or would that be something that a law librarian would be able to search and then email to me?
Sure, we strongly suggest that you come into the library to search the fiche for yourself. It's beneficial for you and your research because you may find other documents that will be beneficial to your research.
Great, thank you. I'm going to give it back to Claudia for another scenario.
For our last civil scenario, let's take a look at resources created by law librarians. You and another attorney who are new to the profession have decided to establish a practice together. One of your first interviews is with a potential client seeking to bring a claim for medical malpractice against a treating physician. Neither you nor your partner has been previously involved in the preparation of a med mal lawsuit. You don't want to turn away potential business, but before you accept the matter, you want to get a quick overview of how a medical malpractice tort proceeds. You have discovered the Law Library Services Research Guide on Medical Malpractice. What is a research guide? Tony, you want to explain that?
Sure. The research guides are created by the law librarians and located on the Law Library Services web pages within the Judicial Branch's website. The research guides focus on Connecticut law and provide a starting point for conducting your research. Currently focused on civil and family matters, with a few in juvenile and property matters, the research guides provide references to a number of resources. Definitions of terms and concepts as defined by statutes, rules, and/or case law, references to governing statutes, rules, regulations, and policy. They may include a selected listing of Connecticut cases, which often define a legal term or concept, are a seminal decision on a matter, or are noteworthy recent rulings. West's Digest key numbers and other digest information are also included to further assist with advancing your research. For our purposes here, the research guides offer references into form books and, in a few rare instances, may include a sample of a form within the research guide itself. The research guides provide references to a wide range of relevant material, some of which is accessible online and some that is not. The guides provide considerable breadth of coverage on a topic and can save you valuable time. The guides are reviewed and updated on a regular basis. Research guides are not meant to be a comprehensive resource, but rather a starting point for your research. In the instance at hand, we could look at the Medical Malpractice in Connecticut Research Guide. For example, Section 1 deals with the Certificate of Good Faith, with references of where to find samples. Section 2 of the guide discusses the petition for automatic 90-day extension of the statute of limitations, and provides an example of the petition. Section 3, Elements of an Action, gives you guidance for determining what you need to prove for a medical malpractice action in Connecticut. Our Law by Subject pages, also produced by the Law Library Services librarians, provide a collection of links to internet resources on a specific topic. Links can include statutes, rules, agency policies and materials, Office of Legislative Research reports, and materials produced by other authoritative legal entities. The content of each page will vary depending on the subject and the amount of information available. Law by Subject pages include links to relevant research guides when appropriate. These pages are designed as a quick way to find relevant and authoritative information on a subject and are a good starting point for your online research.
Thank you, Tony. So, as you gather information about commencing a medical malpractice suit, a mentor whom you have been consulting makes a suggestion that you might find jury instructions particularly helpful in assessing the strength of your case and for checking what evidence is necessary to prove the negligence claim. If someone were to contact you through the Judicial Branch Law Library's Ask a Librarian service, Marianne, where might you direct him or her to locate Connecticut jury instructions concerning medical malpractice?
Claudia, I would provide a link to Connecticut Judicial Branch Jury Instructions with the suggestion to review Section 3.8-3, Medical Malpractice. I would also include a suggestion that they visit the library to look at other jury instruction publications we have, which are not available for free on the internet.
Okay. The Law Library Services Ask a Librarian service is an email reference service, which we will discuss in more detail a little bit further along in this program. And so we've reached the end of this scenario. Terry?
Now, more questions for you, panelists. Where would I find the jury instructions on the Judicial Branch website?
Oh, Taryn, from the Judicial Branch homepage, you would go to the Attorneys tab and then pick jury instructions. Both civil and criminal could be found there.
Great, thank you. All right, Tony, I have a question for you regarding the research guides. So if I'm understanding you correctly, a research guide would be a listing of cases, statutes, treatise sections, and forms on a particular topic. Is all of the reference material in the guide accessible with links so that I would be able to access it from my office?
No, not all of the material. As much of the material that is available on the internet, we'll provide links for it. Some of the material is to treatises and other materials that are in print, especially that are available only in the library.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm now going to give it back to Claudia.